Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard.
Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Friends, today we have someone who's doing exciting things. We always have people like that on our podcast. He's going to talk to us about what he's doing in Nevada to make our electoral system better. His name is Doug, and he's with Nevadans for Election Reform. So welcome to the podcast, Doug.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. Appreciate the opportunity.
Doug, let's get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Okay. My name is Doug Goodman. I'm retired military. Retired, and I'm a registered nonpartisan. I've been a registered nonpartisan in Nevada since 2010. And with our political climate, as it's been over the last decade or more, back around 2013, I decided something needed to be done. And so I founded the organization Nevadans for Election Reform. And we've been working primarily with our legislature since then to ensure all Nevadans, regardless of party affiliation, had a right to vote in all elections. We've been actually partially successful. We've had bills introduced in the legislature starting in 2015. And of course they've never gone anywhere. And all this actually has led to what we saw this last November was the first passage of ballot question 3, which will implement final 5 voting, which is a top 5 nonpartisan open primary with the top 5 finishers, regardless of party, moving forward to the general election, and then using ranked choice voting. It's a constitutional amendment, so we have to pass one more time in 24. But we were very fortunate and very happy that 53% of Nevada voters in this last election decided that this is what Nevada needs. When you have the largest voting bloc in the state being those not registered to a major party, over 35%, when you have that being over 50% among younger voters, there's over 700,000 voters who are excluded from really what is the most important election, and that's the primary. So we were very happy with those results. We're looking forward to our ongoing campaign to win again in 2024, and then the first election under Final 5 voting will then be in 2026.
So the Final 5 voting, that goes into effect in 2026?
That's if we pass in 2024, which we're expecting to, because it's a constitutional amendment. In Nevada, to amend the Constitution, if it's being proposed through an initiative, it has to pass the voters twice. It would be if we pass in 24, that'll be the second passage. The legislature then in 25, our legislature meets every other year for 120 days. Yesterday was the first day of this session. And so then in 2025 session, the legislature will have to do the implementing legislation, and then in 26 is then the first election.
Sure. A lot of our audience are activists in political parties and also in organizations such as yours, non-partisan organization. So how do you advise them to get the ears of legislators like you've done? What tips do you have for that?
Well, ranked choice voting, which is the heart of the whole thing, is really party neutral. It benefits both parties. It benefits, but more importantly, it benefits the people, because what we have found is that in talking to legislators, when you look at the issues they want to advance, you have to be able to collaborate to enact legislation, especially when you have a divided government. The last 4 years was the first time in many where Nevada did not have a divided government. We're back to a divided government this time. And so basically when you present it in that you're able to better advance your issues, that the voters actually then can see that they're being represented, that's a positive. Another thing that I've always told party leaders is that with the decline in voter share in the major parties right now, I mean, the Republican Party in Nevada is below 30% voter share, and the Democratic Party is just over 30%. And people have left the parties because they no longer feel represented because of the hyper-partisan rhetoric. And ranked choice voting and the type of final five voting system, it does lower the temperature. It lowers the rhetoric. It allows the parties to express their policy in a rational, logical way that voters may actually then feel like they're being represented. So
Sure.
They may end up actually rejoining the party. So it's a positive all around, and that's how we've been putting it forward. That's how we have very respectful conversations with legislators.
So that's how you frame it, as a benefit to them because it may bring voters back into the party.
Exactly.
So they don't have to feel threatened by it.
I'm sorry?
How do you get them to give you time to speak? Sometimes when people are contacting legislators, the legislators are too busy. So how did you manage to get their time?
I'm sorry. I with the earplugs, it's a little hard, but how do I manage to what?
How do you manage to get the time of the legislators? Because sometimes legislators can be too busy to talk to groups or citizens.
You know, in Nevada, what's really nice about Nevada is the legislators are willing to listen if you have an idea. When I started this in 2013, it was like I was some crazy guy who lives up near Reno who had this weird idea. My first trip, I just started making phone calls to legislators, not only in my area, but down in Las Vegas. And my first trip to Las Vegas was in March of 2014. I had 19 meetings in 4.5 days.
Wow.
And for instance, right now in the legislature, anybody can walk into this building, can stop a legislator in the hall and talk, can go to their office, make an appointment. It is such it lends itself to citizen participation. And it's just, I mean, you couldn't do this in California, or New York, larger states.
Yeah.
But in Nevada, it's not only at the state level. I have found this happens even at the local level. You can call, a city council member, or a county commissioner, a superintendent of school, of public instruction, and you're going to get a call back. I mean, it's just, that's just the way Nevada is, and it just lends itself to efforts that we were doing, that voters can get their ideas heard. And it actually, helps when a voter knows that their elected official is actually going to listen to them and take them seriously.
Sure. So when you're presenting this to the legislators, what objections do they have to it at first, at least, and how do you overcome those objections?
Well, I mean, right now the big objections to what we've been proposing, of course, come from the party in power. Our biggest opponents have been the establishment wing of the Democratic Party.
Makes sense.
And so what's involved is actually not so much trying to get the big pie all at once, but you go to the little pieces. You go to the members, the people who make up that part of the party. And what we're finding is that as they understand the process, as they see the benefits to them, we're slowly winning some over. There are going to be some we're never going to convince, and that's fine. We understand that. That's just the name of the game. But when you have, for instance, on the initiative, the funding the initiative that we just ran, when you have labor, education, business, mining, and gaming, I mean, these are folks completely different ends of the political spectrum who never, you're lucky if they talk to each other. They were all supporting the amendment to bring Final Five voting to Nevada because they see the benefits. And so, yeah, it's just a very, very slow process. And we're finding successes as we talk to individuals, and these individuals have connections. They have resources. They have, they influence larger groups that we're slowly, winning. And you just have to be patient, and you can't expect your opposition to say, oh yeah, some of the opposition is just as passionate as we are, as the proponents are. And, it is what it is like that. And so, yeah, it just takes patience, and you have to go into every conversation with an open mind. You have to be able to listen, and then you have to be able to calmly and rationalize, explain what we're doing. You can't argue. You can't let your voice get high, because that's actually what we're trying to get rid of, is this partisan bickering, so we can actually get something done. In fact, there's some
I'm sorry, go ahead. I cut you off.
In fact, we have some very contentious voting issues coming up in this session. And it's going to be interesting. Okay, how do we approach voter ID or changing some of the processes that were put in place over the last 2 years? But how do you address it from a different angle? So maybe get, the opposition to say, okay, I'd never thought of looking at it that way. So maybe start considering the trade-off. Will we be successful? I doubt it. But that's how you have to approach it.
So how do you decide on Final Five voting? On this podcast, and also amongst reformers, there's a number of different voting reforms, such as approval voting, star voting, and the like. So how did you decide on Final Five voting?
Okay. Well, first of all, you mentioned approval voting, you mentioned star voting, and I'm a firm believer all the different pieces, all the different ideas have to be on the table, have to be part of the discussion. In my mind, ranked choice voting, well, first of all, it's the more widely adopted. I mean, when you look at where ranked choice voting is used, not just in the political environment, but, in education, in business, I mean, you look at the history of that. So it's got a more track record of success. My original idea back in 2015 was for a top three primary and then ranked choice voting. And so you have top three, top four, top five. The top five idea, basically the major funder of the initiative at the time, this is her big deal, Final Five. When you look at advancing 4 or 5, Alaska just used top 4 primary very successfully. And so the number top 5 seemed okay. You get a good enough spread of opinions in 5 moving forward. And this is, the people moving that idea when they approached Nevada to have Nevada be the next state that they wanted to invest in, that was their thing. And so I said, okay, we'll do top 5.
Makes sense. From what I've heard, it sounds like a very good reform, so it sounds like a good choice.
What was that?
From what I've heard, it sounds like a very good reform, so it sounds like a good choice.
Uh-huh.
So when you go to these sessions, do you and your colleagues, do you split up and talk to different legislators, or you do it as a team to get supported numbers, or how do you do that?
I'm sorry?
When you go to talk to these legislators, how
Yeah.
does your organization, do all numbers go to the same legislator, or do you split up, or how do you do that?
Well, Nevadans for Election Reform is actually a very small, when you look at people actually representing the organization. However, people representing the issue and talking, who are all part of our coalition, we basically know, which issues we're talking and who's going to be in the building. We sort of target different legislators at a different time, but we all might actually eventually end up talking to the same legislator, which is important because that way they know that it's not just one person, that there's actually an organization. There's several people who are in the building lobbying for this. So yeah, you have to spread out, but you want to make sure that the legislators know that this isn't just one person. It's not just one organization that's interested in passing this issue.
Sure. If you don't mind sharing, kindly tell us what organizations that you're in coalition with for this issue.
Besides Nevadans for Election Reform, there's an organization called Vote Nevada. There's Veterans for Political Innovation.
Oh, wow.
Are the other two major, of course, Institute for Political Innovation is also involved. Open Primaries is involved. So there's Represent Us, which are major national election reform organizations are involved with helping us as well.
Sounds good. So you said 2024 is when the final verdict is, when the final election for this is, right?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
November 2024 will be the second passage by the voters.
In 2026, it is when it comes into effect if it goes through, right?
2026 is the first election that will use the final 5 voting process. Yes.
So in Nevada for this, is it a simple majority? Is it 2/3? How many people have to support it for it to go through?
Simple majority.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, the restriction is just 2 passages. It's not a 2/3 or supermajority that is required.
So how is the governor in Nevada? How does he or she respond to this? Do you think that they would be sign this?
Actually, we haven't talked with we have a new governor,
Okay.
Governor Lombardo. He was just elected in November. He defeated our incumbent governor, and Governor Lombardo, who's Republican. He actually has a pretty open mind when it comes to what we're talking about. One of our people who are one of the leaders in the coalition actually was on his transition team for election issues. Another major issue that we were involved with and which was not successful initially, was to form a nonpartisan redistricting commission in the state for reapportionment, and instead of having the legislature gerrymander the maps. This was an initiative that we filed back in 2000 due to COVID and opposition from the existing governor. We were unable to advance that. Last session in 21, a bill to do that was introduced but didn't get a hearing. And the governor, in his State of the State message at the end of January, actually made that one of his priorities. So given that statement, given what we know from the transition team, we think this governor is going to be, favorably inclined to discuss at least. And, he can only publicly do so much, but we'll see. But no, we're very encouraged with the governor's position on at least redistricting and some of the other election reform things. Some of them are very contentious, and they're not going to see the light of day. But at least on the redistricting commission, and we think on the primary issues, I think we're going to be pleased. I think. I said I think we're very encouraged with what we're seeing from the new governor, so we'll see.
So in regards to redistricting, how does the people who don't want it changed, how do they frame their case?
I'm sorry, how do what?
How does the people that oppose redistricting reform, how do they frame their case?
Well, it's, let's see, how do they explain it? They don't really, it's, the process is as it is. It belongs with the legislature, and that's it. So, and it comes down to the same thing. The party in power doesn't want to give up power. It's the same thing with any election reform issue that changes how we vote. If this is the system that got you where you are, why do you want to change it?
Makes sense.
And that's the bottom line. So yeah, it's all about maintaining political power versus giving the power back to the voters where it belongs. In other words, in redistricting, one of the big arguments is it shouldn't be, legislators shouldn't choose their voters. Voters should choose their legislators.
Yes. So in essence, they avoid discussing the issue because they would rather it not be on the table.
What's that?
So the opponents of redistricting avoid discussing the issue because they'd rather it not be on the table.
We don't know. The governor, in his State of the State message, said he wants a bill this session to pass to implement a redistricting commission. And he then said if that doesn't happen, that he is prepared to take it to the voters. So it's going to be, we will see some kind of movement on it. We just don't know where. Bills are still being drafted. And so if there's the way legislation gets filed here in Nevada, you first have what's called the bill draft request, which is very, very simple. It's put in by the legislator, by the governor, whatever. And then the legislative lawyers, they end up writing the bills. And so there's still a lot of bills that still have to be actually written. I think the deadline is the beginning of March when all bills have to be introduced. So we've still got a good month, almost a full month before we might see some language on some of these bills. But the governor definitely wants to see movement on a redistricting commission. And in fact, it's very interesting. We think too, his chief of staff was a former state legislator, was the one who actually introduced the bill last session. So it's, like I said, he wants to see that, and he's ready to. If the legislature won't act, he's ready to take it to the voters, and so we'll see some kind of action. We just don't know if a bill is actually, we're sure the bill will be written, and then we'll have to see how it, if it ends up getting passed, which would be very nice.
All right. So, Doug, kindly tell us, our audience, how they can support your organization.
I'm sorry?
Kindly tell our audience how they can support your organization.
The best way to support our organization is to go to NevadanSforElectionReform.org, and you can contact us through there. You could donate to us through there. And we have links to the other organizations. We have links to Measure 3. So, NevadanSforElectionReform.org.
All right. Doug, thank you for coming on the podcast today. We appreciate you talking about what your organization is doing in Nevada.
Oh, I certainly appreciate the opportunity. And again, thank you very, very much. And just a question offline, will you send me the link for when this airs?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay, great. Well, Andrew, thank you very, very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
All right. We wish you the best in your efforts, and may your initiative get passed.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Bye.
All right. Bye. Bye now.